It is easier for a farm to send its potato all the way around the country and back home in a potato chip bag than it is to send your potato down the road to a local school. Now, the problem that we have with that is not the global market or the superhighway that we've built for our potatoes and all of our food products. Because the problem is we've ended up building superhighways for our food to get into global markets, and we've let the bridges wash out in our local and regional markets. But again, the problem is not so much the superhighway, it's the lack of reliable, solid pathways to market for Michigan farms to Michigan consumers, or even Midwest consumers. So the issues with that are that, one, entrepreneurs are lining up, as we just saw, to go meet that demand. And they're trying to follow in footsteps of people who have forged ahead anyway, despite the fact that without those reliable links, going that direction can be very risky and costly. So what we need to do, those links I'm talking about are called a supply chain between the farm and the buyer. There's lots of things involved. Storage and turning fruit into juice and distribution and marketing. So there's lots of things we need. And all those things are called the market infrastructure. And fixing that is paramount for Michigan to bring those new farms into the market. And also, the second big issue with the fact that those links aren't strong right now in the local and regional area is that we're going to lose out on a lot if we don't do that. We're going to lose out on jobs, on public health improvement, and on what happens when we have good food in our communities. Those are stronger, healthier, happier communities with people in the country, people in the city getting to know each other, and that's really important for Michigan in the future, our strong regions in the future. So our group involved a lot of great people in the private and the public sector, and my co-convener Russ Lewis here, I want to thank him especially. What we did was really try to look at how can we build these pathways. And what we want to talk about real quickly in this slideshow is what's going on now and where is the future? And the future is happening now. What's going on out there? And then third, what we can all do, because we all have a role in that, to fix this market infrastructure. So right now, I talked about the superhighway. And if you look at that orange circle on the outside of that target you have there, that's the superhighway. And out there, things move pretty fast, they're pretty large scale, and the supply chain between the farm and the consumer is very long. Lots of things happen and you don't know who's in between. And so what we're really trying to do is build more shorter supply chains. And there's a lot of development that happens there. And let's see. The thing is that here's those other shorter supply chains. And they are in development, as I said, because something's happening in the country and in Michigan. And starting right at the heart, at our homes and our neighborhoods, people are responding to their need and desire to have better food and neighborhoods with those kinds of options. They're also going the next step to the direct marketing layer, and that's the green layer beyond that. That's a little bit of a step, and farms are coming there too, because sometimes when you're a little farm, it's hard to get out on that superhighway. So going to the farmer's market or going into a CSA is an easy way to get into business. And then the next layer, the purple layer, we call that strategic partnerships, because what's happening there is that it's not just direct between the consumer and the farmer, it involves somebody in between, maybe a distributor or someone processing the food, and all of them, again, they don't know each other very well on the superhighway, but now they have to start working in partnership and getting to know each other. And there's a lot of these really neat strategic partnerships forming. And then on the blue layer, that's the large volume like Walmart and Meijer and all those people really buying big volumes of things. And as you know, they're looking for local food. And in fact, those that are doing that are finding their sales increasing. So they too are interested in building these shorter supply chains. And then at that big orange level, they're also hearing from people that they want local food and good food. For example, Frito-Lay has billboards all across Michigan talking about buying local potatoes because they know that's important to you. All right, so, but the thing is, why we're all here is that, listen, that's my highway, and we've got the broken bridges here in the shorter supply chains. And the problem is, if we put everything on the big highway and we design around that, it's not working out too well for us. On the superhighway, it's very narrow, it's hard to get on there, you've got to have a big car. And so only 6% of Michigan farms end up selling 75% of all our agricultural sales. And that's where we're losing those farms in the middle that Rob just talked about. In a 5-year period, we lost 16,000 farms in that medium scale range of their acreage. We're gaining bigger farms and we're gaining a lot of small farms, but those guys in the middle are really losing out. And then that superhighway is very dependent on lots of oil and a lot of things because it's very long distance, and so it gets very vulnerable when we have shocks coming up in some of those areas. And then, as was mentioned earlier, Michigan in every county has a place where people don't have great access to good food. And so, in a way, the superhighway works for some, but it's not really delivering some of these things we need. One interesting example is, for example, that Michigan plums, most of those that we have now on a commercial scale, have been designed around the baby food industry, for example. And as that has kind of left and grown, those farms are just putting their trees down after a while, especially those retiring farms. Michigan has hardly any plum industry left on a commercial scale because we've been designed around that superhighway. But all around us we could sell plums, but we don't have that transition or the new farmer startup support to help people get into a new product, or develop the packing and the processing and things that are needed to help them do that. And then there's the aging farmers, and we need people to come up behind them. So again, but Michigan helped build the superhighway. We got to be aware of that. We are a food state, and it's part of our history, and our $71 billion of agri-food economy is related to that. And as we mentioned, in order for our big ag economy to survive, it also needs to be responsive to the good food needs and facts around oil supply and things like that. So there's a lot of reason for our bigger companies to pay attention to this as well. So, now that study that mentioned $71 billion in our agri-food industry, and we really are in line, perhaps the biggest industry in Michigan now, also looked at where is the growth coming from, where is the next Michigan agricultural economy coming from. And they looked at all this entrepreneurship that is going on out there and found that really if we built that kind of committed program for new agri-food business startups, we could gain a lot. In fact, they estimated 20,000 jobs a year just if we reach the kind of entrepreneurship success rates that other industries have. And that number would be about 850 successful business starts a year. That's a goal that we've set out. We can reach that if we support those entrepreneurs, and that's a lot of jobs that they can create in their communities every year. And what's really interesting is that study found that 90% of those businesses were small businesses. 766 of the 850 that we want to try and create. So where are these businesses? They are in those shorter supply chains. They're pioneering and developing them. So back at that pretty big level, that blue level, large volume, we have the Cisco Corporation, and we have Dennis Janesh here today somewhere, and he's on the slide. They are finding that to give the customers they want, their customers, which are hospitals and schools and all kinds of things, the variety and taste that they want, they have to seek out farms that have it because they're not getting it on the superhighway. And here's a good example. After pioneering this for a couple years, they have gone from offering only 2 kinds of apples, red and golden delicious. That's the only kind of apples. Even Michigan produces all kinds of apples. And this year they were offering their customers 12 different kinds of apples. And they were coming from Michigan farms. But to do that, and that relates to the recommendation here, that's our first set of recommendations, it has to do with communication and networking strategies. Because on that long, big superhighway, people don't need to know each other. But in order to build these shorter supply chains, we have to help them get together and learn how they operate. You know, like the prison example earlier, they have to figure out how to work together. And so helping them get together with forums and expos, and one really exciting strategy is to designate business districts in your towns where businesses can co-locate and start working together, maybe around a farmer's markets that also has a distributor, and then they start working together and developing products. That builds the supply chain. So those are some recommendations there. And Another area of innovation comes from that purple level, strategic partnerships I mentioned. And not only do they have to get to know each other, but a lot of times the equipment they need doesn't exist, or the packing they need doesn't exist. And Rob mentioned Shetler Dairy. They had to find used equipment from 3 different states because there isn't dairy equipment that fits what they need. So Michigan has an opportunity, and we're proposing that the state develop regional development authorities so that in a region there's a group working with your local ag community to come up with some of those entrepreneurial ideas, whether it's fabricating new machinery or coming up with new processes, and then also put $10 million from Michigan's Strategic Innovation Fund into this development and get it out to those regions so that they can start working with entrepreneurs and make more businesses like this get underway. And this example is Triple D Orchards near Empire, Michigan. And they're an entrepreneur, and they're finding all kinds of businesses wanting to take their farm product and put their own label on it. But most of our processors, again, are so big that they can't really accommodate that size or scale of a business. So they've decided, well, we're gonna meet this market because so many people are coming to us. And they've renovated part of their processing facility, which is around cherries and things. And they said this space is going to be for assisting those entrepreneurs, and they have some food expertise and stuff, and they're going to try and partner with people and develop new products and process them right there. And it's real exciting, and again, they're taking a big risk, but we hope more that will follow them. So another example, that last recommendation around encourage innovation for this strategy of addressing equipment, facilities, and services is really important too, because for example, energy we know is a big challenge in the future, the cost of energy. Well, Michigan currently taxes on-farm installations of wind and solar and things as personal property. And so if you do that as a farm, as part of your farm business, you get a huge tax bill. There is one exemption though. There's an exemption for methane digesters on very large livestock operations. So we think we need to exempt the others as well. And here's a really good example. Mark Elzinga of Elzinga Greenhouses near Kalamazoo. His business, he's a 3rd-generation farmer. He has 10,000 square feet of greenhouse space. And he said he was looking at his greenhouse and it's empty all winter long before he grows petunias for Meyer and places like that in the spring. And he's seeing the market, for example, at Bronson Medical Hospital there in the next picture. They're buying direct from farms. Like a lot of people, that direct market is really building markets and entrepreneurs. And he, as a farmer, said, there's something going on here. I need to try and start growing vegetables in my greenhouse in the winter. So he did. And he invested also, because it costs so much to heat that greenhouse, $4 million into geothermal, solar, wind, and he got hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of tax bill from that. And it's still not resolved. So that's an important issue, and the recommendation here too is that, for example, his area around Kalamazoo, there's 32 million square feet of commercial greenhouse space, and a lot of those farms want to do what he's doing, but they don't have the data or the research to help them transition from what they're doing. So that's what this recommendation is about, a whole set of things around providing data and information people need to get into these markets. And we don't really do that right now. We do it in a lot of areas, but not really at this scale and this type of market. And one of those things is just promoting Michigan agriculture. We are this huge ag state, but we don't really tell people about it, and we have a huge promotion program such as Pure Michigan, and this needs to be a big part of it. And economic development, again, we heard earlier, this needs to be a fundamental piece of what we're doing in economic development. And so another example comes from that heart of our food system. People in their homes and their neighborhoods, and we've heard a lot about that, really taking care of their own food and each other in neighborhood gardens like this one in Flint. And also building entrepreneurs, as we heard from the youth group earlier. Some people in Detroit, you know, networks of gardens are now selling under a common label in Detroit farmers markets. And so it's really important that we recognize one of the things these entrepreneurs and lots of others, not just at the home and neighborhood level, run into are regulations that are designed for the superhighway or designed for communities that didn't think about having hoop houses in them. So we really have to address regulations that are kind of designed for a different kind of system and aren't thinking of these shorter distances between the producer and the consumer. Because really, if you shorten that distance, some of those risks go down. It's not like you're sending meat halfway across. So we have to design some things that fit the size of business and the size of the risk. And food safety was mentioned earlier as a key thing with farms selling to institutions. And we echo that here. Right now, farms that are trying to sell to institutions are facing big costs to get certified, but a lot of those certifications look at them not correct on what size of market and farm that they are. So that has to really be reformed to fit them. So I'll end with saying that we have a bright future if we build those roads and bridges in these shorter supply chains. And it is about health, it's about economic vitality in our community, and making our places great places to live is one of the premier economic development strategies in the state, and that means this is one of the biggest strategies for us to get there. Thank you very much.